Hello, this is PubShorts episode 28. They are losing it. My name is Dr. KK, Innovation Officer at Trinka and Enago, and I'm
Okay.
definitely not losing it, I think.
I
Tony,
hope
are you losing it?
I hope not. I'm Tony O'Rourke. I'm VP for Partnerships here in Enago. I've got to ask you first of all, KK, what's the origin of the title for this episode? We're losing it.
Well, Bell and Sebastian is a band, and they've got a song called "She's Losing It." So I was trying,
Ah, okay,
I was trying to
okay, got it.
find, yeah, I'm trying to find a British song reference for this, and it was difficult for this particular episode. But we are talking about a story in which a publisher is seemingly losing it, and that's why we are talking about it. So, Tony, for those who are watching us, listening to us for the first time, what is PubShots and what is Rinka? What is Inago?
Okay, well, Enago, we're a language specialist. We provide language services, and we are also a technology company. We're providing AI-based tools through the Trinka platform that supports editorial content development and publishing.
Hmm.
And PubShots is a regular podcast which where AK and we discuss aspects of how technology is being used, particularly AI, in
Hmm.
the scholarly communication, the scholarly publishing space.
So let's get right to the
It's
stories.
say you can find all these episodes on YouTube and on LinkedIn. Just do a search for Enago Pub Shots, and you'll see the 26 or 27 episodes that we've already done.
Yeah, we've done 27. And in fact, Tony, the last thing that we talked about in episode 27 a couple of days ago is something similar to what we are going to start talking about. And I'll switch to my screen sharing. And we are talking.
So I've forgotten.
We are talking about a LinkedIn post by Adam Day, and we are showing this because if Adam Day had not posted about it, I would not have known about it. So, Tony, you shared this with me. I will let you start.
Yeah, so Adam and I used to work together at a previous publisher. Adam's an absolutely brilliant data scientist. He created a company called Clear Sky a few years ago, which is responsible for the paper mill alarm. So identifying the use when content is being created by paper mills. And he shared a post from a Chinese colleague, Jason Hu,
Mhm.
um, which highlighted the fact that the Chinese government now is cracking down on paper mills,
Right.
and how the Supreme People Court of China has released an opinion that will put or effectively make paper mills increasingly difficult to run
Right.
in China. And I think this is a wonderful, wonderful story.
Right. So he's Adam Day, as you rightly said, this he crossed as in promoted a Jason Hu post, which is talking about a press conference by the China Supreme People's Court. The conference introduced new guidelines for high quality judicial services vis-a-vis research. These guidelines focus on safeguarding scientific and technological innovation. And the emphasis, obviously, Tony, is on research integrity because we have heard a lot of stories regarding, let's say, potential research integrity problems with research that is coming out of China. And
Yeah.
we are talking about misconduct in the context of ghostwriting, falsifying data, and selling research papers. So the entire sort of conference was, I think it is titled "The Opinions," and
Yeah.
one
But
one
that's the important thing. It's an opinion at the moment. It's an important stage in that legislation process. The opinions are communicated before they go into legislation.
Right. So this is the Google translated version of the story itself, and I just like to read out something. So what this is, I think, verbatim quote. Text taken from the translation, I think. So strict punishment for misconduct such as fabricating or falsifying research findings, which include buying, selling, ghostwriting, and proxy submitting research manuscripts or project application materials. Buying. Now, this the kind of punishment that they are talking about is obviously heavy legal, including imprisonment, if I'm not mistaken. So my question to you, overarching, it's a great step in my opinion. Is it too harsh? One. Second, should other countries follow suit?
Uh, no, it's not too harsh at all. I think anything that undermines the undermines academic rigor and the academic communication process needs to be clamped down. I think what paper mills have been responsible for is for creating content, creating organizations, creating false researchers, which undermines the whole integrity of the process. So no, I don't think it's too bad, too heavy at all. And should other countries follow suit? Well, I'm not aware of there being the same problem in other countries. I'm not seeing other countries creating paper mills to the same extent. If they are, then yes, maybe they should. But I know that at the moment, at least, the vast majority of these culprits tend to be unfortunately based in China.
Right. So if you expand the scope to beyond paper mills alone, just research integrity related, and including things like fact checking, because recently you must have heard about this. Mark Zuckerberg has shut down the
Yeah,
fact
yeah,
checking,
yeah.
the wing of Facebook. I mean, that is, there are changes that are happening in the global space, the political space as well, which are forcing people, as in things, to go the opposite way from the point of view of what the Chinese People's Supreme Court has just said. So that is what my sort of question was sort of hinting at. I believe that all countries should have some sort of regulation. We talked about the research integrity oath 2 episodes ago. I mean, that is in France you need that as a researcher. So maybe other countries should follow suit, and similarly maybe legal measures to keep things in check.
No, yeah, from that perspective, I completely agree with you.
Yeah.
I don't understand Meta's thinking or Mark Zuckerberg's comments at all. And it seems to be sort of a slightly retrograde step.
Yeah.
And that, social media has become so endemic now that there has to be some way of ensuring that when somebody's using those tools, there is some form of integrity and accuracy in there.
Right. So we are then now crossing over the Atlantic or the Pacific, depends on how you look at it. But we are talking about a story from the US. The US science funding agencies roll out policies on free access to journal articles. So this is very interesting from the overarching funding for research point of view. This is published in Science. And so this is talking about policies requiring posting of only peer-reviewed manuscripts in public repositories. So could you, for somebody who's not familiar, so what are the current ways in which articles can be read, let's say free of cost, from repositories? So we know about preprints, and now we are talking about something else. Could you explain how things are right now?
Yeah. So again, this is a story which has evolved over the last 20 plus years. I mean, how long has the internet been active within the academic publishing world? So the traditional way of accessing content was by subscribing to a journal and accessing a journal which is protected by a firewall. And then in the 90s, late noughties, early noughties, we saw open access models coming out, which meant that content was made available to anyone, because the fee to make that content available was paid for by the researcher or the researcher's institution. Preprints have existed for over 30 years as a means of making a version of a research paper available at the point at which the researcher is ready to make it available. So that could be weeks or months before it's submitted to a research journal. And then you have, after that, things like institutional repositories. So universities creating their own repositories where they're saying, look, if you want funding from my institution, if you want to work at this institution, one of the conditions is that any research that you publish has to be made available. A version of that paper has to be made available via our repository. So what the US government's been trying to do for the last 10 years is to make state-funded, government-funded research in the US for all government-funded agencies available to all, which it's actually a big deal. And publishers are rightly so nervous about this, because it effectively undermines the traditional subscription model. I mean, and again, we've seen an increasing move from the last 10 years away from subscription models to read and publish sub agreements, or transformative agreements, so that instead of paying for a subscription to access the content, you're paying a read and publish fee, which means that not only is your content, can you read the content, but that content is then made available open access to anyone in the world who wants to see that. And more content is being made available through read and publish deals. So basically what the US government's trying to say here is, well, you highlight the text, it requires grantees to post accepted peer review manuscripts in the agency's public repositories as soon as it's published. There has been a 12-month embargo up until now, for the last 10 years. And they expect research funding agencies to require immediate sharing of project data, and which again is that's a relatively new thing. So when you've got something like 10% of the world scientific literature coming from US state-funded agencies, it's quite a big deal. But there's an interesting quote from the American Society for Clinical Oncology, which says, look, help if we accept these restrictions, 40% of the content that's available in our journals, in very high impact, very important, prestigious journals, 40% is available free of charge straight away. So that completely undermines, or potentially completely undermines, the value. And I know librarians will say, oh no, look, even if some of this content is available free of charge, will continue to subscribe. Financial pressures are financial pressures, and at some point, those sorts of comments or those sorts of decisions will be reviewed. So it's an interesting story. The EU have been looking to do the same thing for the last 20 years, really. So the question is going to be, in 10 years' time, what will a journal look like? What is access to scientific content going to mean? And ultimately, there's no such thing as a free lunch. Who's paying for this?
Right.
Who's going to pay for that rigor, that peer review, that structure, that formal, that prestige that is given to a journal because of the value it has in the research process?
Right. So just a quick couple of clarifications. This is this is to be enforced by the end of 2025, and it is from the U.S. National Institutes of Health and the Department of Energy. But other institutes are also, expected to follow similar things in the near future. And one question that has been discussed even in our friend James Butcher's newsletter Journalogy is that, does this also affect the licensing for use of such material for things like AI training? So that's something that is yet to be answered.
Good question.
Yeah,
really good question.
Yeah. So we are
just because something's made available open access doesn't necessarily mean that the content is freely available for anyone to then use. It really depends on the license.
Right. So we are moving on across the Atlantic this time. This is a clear jump to Finland, which has downgraded MDPI and Frontiers. And the question is, will others follow suit? This is from Times Higher Education. So the story basically is that Finland is downgrading 271 journals from MDPI and Frontiers based on concerns over quality and the publishing model. Now, why are they worried about it? Because there have been changes in the way open access in terms of article processing fees, as well as the increase in volume. So, potentially there is a lower quality of research being outputted, and that is a concern. So other countries might also follow suit, is what this article is arguing. So, Tony, preliminary thoughts on this?
I suppose this is a natural repercussion of some of the problems that we've seen over the last couple of years with some of these bigger open access publishers and some of the perceived issues around quality. Right. And I know from first-hand experience how hard these organizations are working to counter these claims. But these are two organizations that have grown very quickly over the last 5 years. So I think it's good that a country is policing or trying to police access to content in this way. But I think they should also have an open mind and keep monitoring the situation to see how these journals are changing.
As expected, Frontiers and MDPI have criticized the decision, calling it unfair. I mean, arguable from their point of view. My question to you, Tony, what are the implications for publishers and researchers in general? When you when you read such stories, what should they be thinking about doing differently?
Difficult one, because ultimately you want to be able to understand the literature in the area that you're researching, and if that literature is in a journal from an open access publisher, it shouldn't make any difference. If it's legitimate, if it's well structured, if it's well researched, and it adds and it supports your findings, you should be able to access it.
Right.
So I suppose I would be concerned if it's been downgraded. What does that mean in terms of the seriousness of those journals in the minds of those publishers, those researchers? But the content is still there; they can still access that content.
So one of the main criteria for publishing a research article would be novelty, and the next article that we are talking about, it's a Nature Index article titled "Can Novelty Scores on Paper Shift the Power Dynamics in Scientific Publishing?" So I'll quickly read out. It discusses how novelty scores could influence scientific publishing, and it is talking about Decide Publish is a new I guess I would say, how would you describe a new brand, I suppose, who have
I suppose it's a new platform.
New platform. Okay, it's a publishing platform, I guess. Yeah, I suppose I should have remembered.
It's an open source research software where scientific research is published, validated, and curated.
Right.
without problem. It's a platform.
So this is a platform which has come up with this novelty score, and that's what is being discussed in this paper, Nature Index paper. And a high novelty score highlights innovative connections in research, and the score aims to shift power dynamics, as is mentioned in the title. Now, it could guide editors and help authors to assess their work impact. Novelty scores, if you're wondering how they are calculated, are based on algorithms predicting future research trends. The concepts face challenges. Obviously, any new concepts like this would face challenges. But then, Tony, it's probably a good way to measure it. So it's one of the most challenging things for anyone, for even for a human, to judge if a paper or a research is indeed novel. So, are you convinced about this, or do you want to see more or read more about it?
I'd like to see more. I'd like to see more about this. I know one of the things that every publisher wants, every journal publisher wants to do is understand, not just how valid is the research,
Hmm.
does it support the existing knowledge in that space, but also how novel is that research?
Right.
How much? And not every journal will publish novel, research, groundbreaking research.
Right.
They'd like to, but for those that are actively encouraging novelty in their submissions, then what processes are currently being used to assess that, apart from the knowledge and skills of the reviewers and editors. I'd be interested to see how this one evolves. I think there will be more and more tools like this to help try and give a novelty rating. I mean, I don't know whether this is subject specific or whether they're able to assess novelty more easily in some subject areas rather than others. But no, I'm interested to see how this one goes.
I do not think that it is. It mentions if it is limited to one particular subject area, but we'll keep a track on whether this
No,
is.
I don't think it does.
Yeah.
I'm interested to see how this might be applied in, say, physics or in medicine or in chemistry, for example.
Right, Tony, we are fast moving through Eurasia, and we have landed in South Korea right now. This is an editorial from the Journal of Korean Medical Science. It is a
Yeah,
disappointing, sad one, unfortunately. It
yeah,
discusses the concerns about the decline of medical academics in Korea as 2025 begins. It paints a sad story, and an increase in requests for revisions and fewer manuscript submissions are the general trend. Now, the medical crisis in Korea is affecting research, and from what we know, that the funding, R&D funding into research has been cut down last year by about, I think, 30% or so, if I'm not
yeah,
mistaken. And it seems that the article is arguing that professors are spending less time on research due to increased workloads, because there is less, obviously, funding, and new research projects are not being initiated. The decline is not limited to Seoul National University, which is probably the author, as in the author's alma mater in this case, I suppose. And the one worrying trend that I see is that within whatever is published in 2024, the actual research has been done before that. So what we are expecting is even more of a decrease in the trend of output that is coming from Korea. So, Tony, we have South Korean clients, a lot of them actually. So, are you concerned, and what do you suggest that our researchers do in such cases?
there's $1 million question. It's a really, I mean, it's not surprising with that 30% reduction
Mm.
in funding that's existing medical researchers are spending more and more time, less and less time in the research process. What can they do? I just make sure that we can make it as easy as possible for them to have their papers published or at least visible to support the perceived value of the Korean research community. There's a direct knock-on effect between research and growth in the economy. And if there's less research, if there's less R&D spending, there's less new patents being developed, and there's new technologies, and there's new treatments coming out, the economy doesn't grow. So there has to be it's a government level decision. But it's a real pity to see this.
All right. So the final news story that we are covering is one about a transformative agreement, or
Yeah,
about transformative
which we talked
agreements.
about at the beginning of this call.
Yeah, sure. The transformative agreements show immediate impact on global access output, which is sort of interesting. So, Springer Nature has published this, and it's a white paper on transformative agreements. So, the transformative agreements significantly boost global open access output, and countries like the US of A, South Africa, and Slovenia show major increases in in increase in OA. So it also mentioned projects. This is Lyrasis is a non-profit member organization serving supporting libraries, archives, museums, and culture heritage organizations around the world. And so
Yeah,
Lyrasis in the USA has published more than 533 articles in 6 months, up from 140. So the generally it is because of these transformative agreements, there's increased research output, and it obviously improves inclusivity and accessibility across different research disciplines and everything. So Tony, I have to ask you this because I've been asking you this for the last several episodes, tying every episode's one story to ONOS. This is about to happen in India. Do you expect an increase in research output to the level that the Indian government is expecting after?
I absolutely do. Unfortunately, one of the problems having worked in publishing, you look at countries where there is a high level of rejection by publishers when papers are received, and it's not because they're necessarily bad science,
Mm.
but maybe there's a lack of appreciation, lack of understanding of the nature of those journals, and part of that is due to the fact that those organisations don't have access to many of those journals, so they don't understand kind of the profile, what the kind of requirements that are being by a journal.
Mm.
So easier access to the journals, better relationships with those journal editors and journal publishers, a deeper understanding of what it requires, what makes up a good paper, more access to things like editing services such as their own, would improve the quality of the papers. I do see there will be a marked increase in output. Not that it's small now, but it's going to be more organisations and more researchers, more organisations being successful in their publication plans.
Right, right. And there's a lot to catch up because China and US leading, and maybe India will catch up with them maybe in the next decade or
Well,
so, depending on.
well, yeah, absolutely. But what's really, really, I know we've talked about ONOS before, is that it's one of the few truly national arrangements. A lot of these things, particularly in the US one isn't a national thing. It's done on a state by state, region by region basis.
Right.
Germany is national. France is looking at introducing more national requirements. JISC in the UK is obviously UK specific, but there are very few truly national agreements such as this, and particularly of that sort of scale.
All right, moving on to the first of the two quick hits we have. The first one is from The Economist, which is interesting. It is titled "Academic Writing is Getting Harder to Read. The Humanities Most of All." So first of all, Tony, do you agree with this? It is getting harder to read.
I don't know if I do agree with it, because if I don't understand something, I've got access to tools which will help me to understand something. So, but yes, I think there's more. I think to understand the general literature, the overall literature, and the literature in a particular space, yeah, I think it is more difficult because there's so much more of it.
Right. So this
And you need tools to help you understand that.
right. This article specifically mentioned a controversial thesis that was, I guess, not. I mean, it was promoted through X because the writer of the thesis. And I want to read the title of the article. The thesis. It's titled "Olfactory Ethics: The Politics of Smell in Modern and Contemporary Prose." This is a thesis that was somebody the author had posted, and it drew a lot of criticism in terms of how complex and maybe meaningless some of the research is. So this I don't know.
It's only for those who are not interested in that particular subject. The research for the sake of research. I support. I applaud. You're furthering human knowledge. It's got to be a good thing.
I completely agree, but the article says that it is getting complex. I wanted to know your opinion, whether you work with a lot of clients across publishers and nations and everything, and we receive a lot of, let's say, manuscripts for which we help improve and eventually get publishing ready. So I personally believe that it is not getting worse, and research every aspect of the human experience can be researched further to improve our knowledge, and this is fine. The olfactory prose related research is fine. And Tony, one personal anecdote: my partner recently shared an interview of the ex-Greek Minister of Economy. Is an economist called Yanis Varoufakis. If I don't know if you're familiar with his work, but he is
yeah, I've heard of him, but Yanis Varoufakis, yeah, of course.
Yeah, so he
was quite controversial a few years ago, wasn't he? Some of the things he was.
Right. So he wrote an entire book about capitalism. and the market economy without using jargon. And he sort of framed that book as a letter that he would write to his daughter. So that's an interesting. I'm just reading it. It's a wonderful sort of I'm from the field of medicine. For me, economics is still things that are difficult. I mean, something that I find difficult to understand. So there is room for, I guess, accessible text throughout literature and academia and research, but that shouldn't prevent research from a particular type of research from being, let's say, looked down upon. That's the way I would feel it, and I think you agree with this.
I agree with that.
Yeah. All right. So the last story that we have is this is the story that we titled the episode on. They are losing it is the name of the episode, because Nature, the publisher, has done something. So this article is from futurism.com. The publisher of the journal Nature is emailing authors of scientific papers offering to sell them AI summaries of their own work. And the headline says that I find it ridiculous. It's jumping on the AI bandwagon where we throw AI at about anything, useful or not. So this package, Tony, is cost about $49 and includes a summary, research brief, an audio summary, and social media content. Authors are advised to review the AI generated content for errors, and critics see that this as a cash grab. So, your thoughts on it, Tony?
Listen, my thoughts about this are very, very simple. I think every publisher's right to help the author to promote their work, and if anything they can do that will help the author to communicate that piece of research, it's got to be a good thing. Not every author, not every researcher has the time to create a summary, to create a press release. Why shouldn't Springer Nature or anybody, any publisher, provide access to those sorts of services? I mean, it's relatively inexpensive, and it gives the author something which he or she will be able to use in press releases, in sharing their stories to the wider public, their research to the wider public. So no, why not? I mean, they can, it's personal choice. If they want to do it, they can use it. If they haven't got the funding, then they won't.
Right. I think
and I don't get a problem at all. I mean, the one caveat, as I say, and you've already commented on this, is that there still requires the researcher to make sure that the summary is an accurate reflection of the research, and if it isn't, then you've got the opportunity to make those changes. But I think overall, I think this is a good thing.
I think your cat is in vocal agreement to you with this.
Yeah, I can hear. Sorry.
No, it's fine.
Yeah.
It's fine. It's fine. So, Tony, you mentioned that researchers need a lot of support. So, how do you how are we providing support, and how can people find more about the support that we provide? You can talk about Trinka, Enago, and
I'm
PubShorts
sorry,
if
I've
you
been
want.
distracted by my cat. So you can find out about Trinka at trinka.ai, find out more about the products and services we offer. You can find out more about Enago, enago.com, the services that we provide for to help the academic communication process, as editing, translation, etc. And you can, as I said at the beginning of this call, you can find out more, or you can watch more of the PubShorts episodes over at YouTube or LinkedIn. Just search Enago PubShorts, and you'll get the complete list of the 27 recordings that we've done.
Right.
And if you want to find me or KK, you can get hold of me at tonio.enago.com, or you can find KK or me on LinkedIn.
Right. So, Tony, if somebody were to subscribe to somebody were to watch us on YouTube, would you like them to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell notification icon?
Absolutely. Hit that like button and share the videos with your colleagues.
Right. So, Tony, before I leave you, I want to ask you about Bell and Sebastian. Are they one of your favorite UK artists?
No, well, listen, everyone is different strokes for different folks. I've listened to Bell and Sebastian over the years. They didn't particularly resonate with me, but I know people who are hugely, almost obsessive about the band. They love everything that they do. I'm just not one of those.
Fair enough. I mean, if to each their own likes and dislikes, I think that's
exactly.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, exactly.
So with that pearl of wisdom, we bring this episode to a close. This was PubShorts episode 28. They're losing it, and on behalf of everybody, including Tony, who helped us bring such content, this is Dr. KK signing off for PubShorts. We'll see you in the next one. Bye bye, Tony.
See you in the next one. Bye bye.